Hello, comrades, and welcome back to the Liberation Hour. If you can't tell, I'm currently at home filming this week's news segment. I wasn't able to make it into the studio last night due to some personal reasons, aka my windshield got totally screwed up. So here we are. I am currently filming. It is Thursday, November 27th. It is Thanksgiving Day. Um, Shout out to all of my Native American comrades out there. I do not fuck with the colonizers. And so today we stand with our Native American comrades on this day, giving thanks to them and continuing to fight for land, bread, and peace. And so, land back. And yeah, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get the show started. First, top of the hour disclaimer. WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign online community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not meant to represent WRFU, UC, IMC. So yeah, comrades, welcome back to another episode of the Liberation Hour. We are on episode, I want to say 19, going 19 episodes strong. That's pretty great, honestly. Pretty proud of that. And we're going to continue to go. So I have 3 solid news stories for us today, and then we're going to be switching over to the pre-recorded segment with Comrade Monty, in which we discuss the need for an independent, militant, working class party. And why do I say we need an independent, militant, working class party? Well, this is because we need a party and we need a political movement which is actually representing those of the working class. The Democratic Party will never be that. We go over people like Graham Plattner and X Mamdani, who are 2 people who are presenting a lot of entryist and opportunist types tendencies, which tends to, I feel, very much skew the narrative on how we actually fight back against the bourgeois class. Many think that if you can change the system from the inside. This is untrue. And Comrade Monty and I really go into this and discuss just how untrue this is and how important it is to maintain our revolutionary principles and our revolutionary basis and continue to organize comrades around the larger movement and abandoning parties like the Republican and definitely Republican, but also the Democratic Party, who are obviously not representing our best interests. And so, without further ado, that is my segment with Comrade Monty. Let's go ahead and get into the news real fast. So, the news today. First story that I have that the comrades have put together for me is nursing is no longer counted as a, quote, professional degree by the Trump administration. This was published on November 20th, and it was updated on November 21st, written by Jasmine Laws from Newsweek. The Department of Education has excluded nursing as a, quote, professional degree program as it sets about implementing various measures regarding student loans laid out in President Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. Big Beautiful Bill probably means something else if you know what I mean, knowing what we know now with the whole Epstein. Just saying. The move has sparked significant uproar among nurses and nursing groups. Sorry, my cat. With the American Nurses Association saying, as reported by Nursing World, that limiting nurses' access to funding for graduate education threatens the very foundation of patient care. And the regulatory definition of a professional degree, 34 CFR 668.2 from 1965, nursing was not definitively listed as a professional degree, although the text lists a number of professions, but says a professional degree is not limited to those mentioned. The change will impact hundreds of thousands of students. There are over 260,000 students currently enrolled in entry-level Bachelor's of Science in Nursing programs, and around 42,000 enrolled in associate degree nursing, according to the data collected by the American Nurse Association. So, what does this all mean exactly? Well, this is very unsurprising considering that, the basis of capitalist exploitation tells us and shows us that we will all be turned into proletarians at one point or another. How does this necessarily connect back to this stripping of a professional degree from nurses? Well, to be frank, nursing has already been, as all workers are, nurses have been extremely exploited by the system. This is to further exploit the skills that they attain during their education in order to pay them less and to continue to keep working people under the boot of fascist capitalism. When we look at something like this, such as a professional degree being stripped away or being seen as a professional degree, that doesn't necessarily make it not professional in the eyes of the people who need that care. This is very much a political and an economic move to continue to exploit workers for their labor. I would say this, more than anything, shows very definitively how the Trump administration, and really any administration, and any of these bourgeois parties view working people's lives and working people's needs. I'm not saying that Joe Biden or Kamala Harris would have done this. I don't think that's true. But what I am saying is that part of the entire reason that this whole situation is even happening right now is because the Democrats can continue to not be able to put up an actual fight against our fascist oppressors, which are the current MAGA movement and the Republican Party. And it is because they aid and abet this kind of thing. This is a symptom of a larger problem, which is that workers will continue to be exploited by those in power who pay for people to be in power to continue to put measures forth like this. The Democrats and the Republicans aid and abet each other and their larger movement and scheme towards serving capital. And as we can see with this whole situation going on, not only is it a slap in the face of the American working people and nurses who keep hospitals running, frankly, but it is also a huge step towards trying to essentially strip working people of the hard-earned degrees and pieces of paper, frankly, that we have worked towards in order to pay us less and to devalue our work, even though our labor is what makes what makes this economy. And it is why we must continue to work towards a revolutionary movement, because these things will continue to happen no matter who's in office. When the Democrats are in office, they get nothing done, and when the Republicans are in office, they get everything that they want done because the Democrats aid and abet them either way. We could have had things like a healthcare, single-payer healthcare, and a nationwide rail system. We could have had these things, and we still can have these things, but it will never happen while capital has its grips, us in our grips, in its grips. Sorry, and so I think it's extremely important to note that this is a symptom, but it is no less. It is still extremely hurtful to the working people, the working nurses of America, who rely on having this professional degree to be paid a fair wage, which they still aren't. And they will never be paid a fair wage until we abolish capitalism. And it is why we must continue to fight with our comrades who work in these hospitals, who work in the nursing industry, and who deserve so much better than this. It is why we must join them on the picket lines when they're on strike. It's why we must continue to fight with mutual aid and work with our nursing population in order to fight for their working rights and fight for all of our rights towards emancipation from capitalism. And so I would say that's what I have the most to say on this subject. But as we can see here, when it comes to the next story of the night, we have, let's see, the Department of Education. Let's take a look here. Oh wait, I think this is part of the nursing thing. Sorry, I'm all frazzled right now. Quote, I would say this is from Olga Yakusheva, a professional nursing and business of health at Johns Hopkins University. This is what she told Newsweek. The broader impact will be increased shortages of primary care, especially in areas with significant physician shortages. This could mean longer wait times and less time with your medical provider, as well as higher workloads for physicians. The strain on the educational system can lead to long-term reductions in the domestically educated nursing workforce, increasing labor costs and growing reliance on foreign-educated nurses. In addition, the Department of Education Press Secretary for Higher Education, Ellen Keast told Newsweek, "This is fake news at its finest. The department has had a consistent definition of what constitutes a professional degree for decades, and the consensus-based language aligns with this historical precedent. The committee, which included institutions of higher education, agreed on the definition that we will put forward in a proposed rule. We're not surprised that some institutions are crying wolf over regulations that never existed because their unlimited tuition ride on the taxpayer dime is over." Okay, that is such fucking horseshit, first of all. Okay, I'm not even on air right now, technically, so I can say whatever I want. That's fucking horseshit. And there's a reason why they're doing this to nurses, and it's because they want to, quote, cut back costs on things like paying for education, when in fact people are already in thousands of dollars of debt. I have another quote here. "Not including nursing as a professional degree is yet another barrier to nursing education. Restricting access to guaranteed federal loans will severely limit the number of highly educated providers to provide care in this complex environment. This impacts nurse preparation at every level, and especially graduate nursing education. Not including nursing as a professional degree is more than an affront to the nation's most trusted profession. It is a serious blow to the health of our nation." Period. That's what it is. Frankly, let's be totally honest here. This is a move to currently, in a larger movement of, I would say, anti-intellectualism and trying to. Sorry, Mike Zuko. What are you? Anyway, this is what I would call a move in trying to further take people away from actually having access to education, which obviously is ultimately a detriment to all of us, because being educated obviously has higher levels of not dying. You know, if you have educated nurses and physicians who are able to actually take care of you and your ailments and don't just sit there and pray. Please, like, this is the most ridiculous shit, and it isn't actually getting anything done. If anything, it's the opposite of getting something done. It is this is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard, or I've ever had to report on, because I mean, I don't even know what to say, honestly. Like why? What is the utility in this, other than to continue to devalue education as something that people frankly need and society needs? And so the opinion from all of this is Trump's Department of Education has dealt a huge blow to the healthcare industry with this decision. The outbreak of COVID-19 made it all too apparent how vital nurses are to our healthcare system, while simultaneously showing how understaffed, underpaid, and overworked they are. Little side note there, it's pretty much known at this point that, like, nurses have almost like an identical education to doctors, and yet they have to cram it in way more, of course, because doctors go through I would say they go through like 4 more years of school, but being a nurse basically means that you have to know almost everything that a doctor knows, and I'm not a nurse, obviously, but having spoken with many nurses and people who have parents who are doctors and who are doctors themselves, yeah, nurses make hospitals. They make hospitals run. You don't want to piss off the nurses if you're a doctor working at a hospital. And so the only possible motive for this move can be greed, pure and simple. No compassion and no foresight of any kind. The end result of this will cause a ripple effect well into the next generation. An already overworked nursing staff will, in time, begin seeing a drastic reduction in its numbers. Like Olga Yakushev states above, I'm sure many believe this will push more people to study abroad. With our economy on shaky grounds and the prohibitive costs, will likely not produce the necessary amount of nurses needed. This is yet another example of short-term and short-sighted profit-taking precedent over long-term gain. Once again, capital is our largest and our biggest and our most formidable enemy in fights like this. If, this stupid fucking administration and many before it, whether they're Republican or Democrat, continue to want to have this anti-immigrant line, want to have this anti-foreign education line, literally just a lot of antis. And in fact, this is only further limiting our actual capacity here in America to have an educated population, to have a better economy. If we don't have people educated in healthcare and actually how to care for people, like, we're going to eventually be back in the fucking Stone Age. Like, this is only regressive. But of course, capitalism doesn't see it that way. It wants profits now, which is why this is happening. This is, I mean, I would say it's unprecedented, but I don't think that's true. Because, I mean, if we look at this whole situation and situations like it, I mean, this is what capitalism wants. It wants to it wants to strip us of anything of value. It wants to, strip the copper out of the walls and everything, if that's what it takes, and leave us destitute. And this is why we must continue to fight back, because this will only continue to get worse. This is the tip of the iceberg as it concerns capital and its willingness to continue to strip working people of our rights, of our dignity, of our education, of everything. And so this right here is why we need to continue to fight back, no matter what. Organize. As I always say, please organize. And so, moving on to our next story. Again, U.S. mercenary firm tied to a notorious aid scheme is recruiting for new Gaza deployment. As many of you have probably heard already, this is a pretty big story. So this is from Sharif Abdel Kudus. I am so sorry, Mr. Sharif, I don't know what. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. This was published on November 19th, 2025 at Dropsite News. UG Solutions, which provided security for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, has been interviewing ex-soldiers for potential robust security operations. Okay, so this article states that UG Solutions, a leading U.S. military subcontractor that provided security for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, also known as the GHF, is stepping up its recruitment efforts amid possible plans for several aid distribution sites to be set up in Gaza by next month, Dropsite has learned. A former Army officer who applied for a position as a, quote, international humanitarian security officer at UG Solutions told Dropsite that a company official told him in a job interview at the end of October that 12 to 15 sites were being planned to open in Gaza and that the company was, quote, going to need a lot more guys. The former Army officer spoke with Dropsite on condition of anonymity, citing security concerns. The future of Gaza is at a critical juncture between following this week's Security Council vote to approve a U.S.-sponsored resolution authorizing an international stabilizing force in Gaza, which would not fall under the command of the UN, but rather a so-called Board of Peace chaired by President Donald Trump. Yeah, so not so peaceful. This committee would have sweeping authority over Gaza, including overseeing reconstruction, security, economic recovery, and coordinating the distribution of humanitarian aid. The use of private military contractors in aid distribution in Gaza first began in May with GHF opening 4 distribution sites in Gaza guarded by security contractors, many of whom were U.S. military veterans recruited by UG Solutions. For the 4.5 months that GHF operated in Gaza, more than 2,600 Palestinians seeking food were killed and over 19,000 wounded by Israeli forces or security contractors at or near aid distribution sites. The sites were dismantled after a U.S. brokered, quote, ceasefire agreement went into effect in Gaza on October 10th. The role of GHF and private military contractors in any future aid distribution in Gaza has been highly contentious. In late August, as ceasefire negotiations were underway, and Israel's genocidal military assault was in full force, Hamas agreed to remove language that would have prevented the GHF from remaining in Gaza after the agreement went into effect in what was seen as one of several major concessions. Okay. So, kind of stopping there for a second, what I want to say here first and foremost, this genocide is not going to stop when we have a bunch of military guys who want to go in there and use it as an excuse to kill Palestinian children. Stop it. No, don't. Sorry, one of my cats. Anyway, this is... To say the least, this is more than concerning. This is pretty bad. As I'll talk about with my comrade Monty in the upcoming segment, this is very much reminding me of when Graham Plattner said that he was serving, and he went and served in Afghanistan with Blackwater as a mercenary and as a security guard. Unacceptable, frankly, unacceptable, and very much Nazi activities. And this is the same situation. This is a front, as we have seen many times over, because, I mean, let's be honest, guys, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is nothing more than an excuse for Israel and America to continue killing Palestinian people. They will not stop this genocide on any grounds other than military intervention, and that's what needs to happen. We need to, this needs to stop. This needs to be confronted with a coalition of the multiple different countries that have spoken out against the genocide, and it must not just simply be it cannot just be a, this needs to be a full-on military operation. This needs to be force. Israel and America will never stop the genocide, will never cease this genocide until they are forcefully stopped from continuing to do it. And the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation is nothing more than a front for them to continue to do genocide on while saying that, oh no, we're actually delivering aid. No, you're not. You're murdering children. There was a video of a young boy who was, I believe this was months ago, was going to get aid. He'd walked 12 kilometers to go in and get aid. He got a small bag of rice, and he kissed an American on the hand. I believe he was American. He kissed a foreign aid worker on the hand, and then right after was shot by an IOF soldier. Point blank. And this was deliberate. They will never stop. We must, and this doesn't just stop at a ceasefire. This continues. This means end the apartheid. This means dismantle Israel. This means reinstate Palestinian sovereignty. And this means land back for the Palestinian people. Point blank. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable. To those who are currently going to work for this contractor as security guards, shame. Shame. It is the same amount of shame that I would put on someone who is working for ICE. Shame. Absolutely not. There is no amount of money. And this is the same principle for people who join the military. Shame. There is no amount of money you could pay me to go and serve in one of these horrific killing schemes. To kill brown people, basically. For real estate and for oil. Absolutely not. I cannot... What we must continue to do is fight for the Palestinian people, because no one else is. This needs to be a united coalition, a united front for Palestine. And the opinion written here for this segment is, during the war in Gaza, U.S. contractor or U.S. mercenaries, mercenary companies like UG Solutions attached themselves to the, quote, aid organization, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And these companies have made the news on numerous occasions, at least once for ruthlessly gunning down starving Palestinians as they ran towards stockpiles of food and medicine. Now that the, quote, ceasefire is in effect, these same companies are moving to expand and secure even larger contracts, providing security for newly planned Gaza aid sites. These are just killing fields. It is nothing more, nothing less. These are not aid sites. Do not be fooled. The war has ended and the occupation has begun. Israel has already broken the ceasefire hundreds of times and displayed tactics quite similar to the aforementioned American mercenaries on other aid sites, both during and after the war, also known as the genocide. This is not a war, this is a genocide. Despite the facade of peace being reinforced by the propaganda machines of both nations, the noose appears to be tightening around the Gazans that refuse to evacuate. The occupying force is growing, and vital supplies are being tightly controlled. Israeli settlers creep ever inward, displacing any Palestinians in their path, and it's truly sickening how far the world has allowed this to go. This is unacceptable on every level. And this is why, comrades, we must continue to fight. We must continue to push, and we must continue to not allow this to happen. by any means at this point, because Palestinians are being murdered. Cold-blooded murder. That's what this is. Unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. And so, moving on to my last story. Zoran Mamdani's meeting with Donald Trump. On Friday, November 21st, Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani met with President Donald Trump in the White House for a very contentious conference. The media flurry was, as Trump himself pointed out, intense, saying, "I've had a lot of meetings with the heads of major countries, and nobody cared. In this meeting, you people have gone crazy." Through the course of the mayoral election, serious barbs were traded between Trump and Mamdani. Trump, with particular venom, claiming that Mamdani is not a citizen, and he is, that he is a communist, which he isn't, and that he could potentially be deported if he attempts to interfere with ICE operations in New York City as mayor, and the working class must not allow this to happen. Trump-aligned pundits have alleged all manner of terrorist sympathies and conspiracies with Mamdani and his campaign, with some figures fear-mongering the election of a left-wing Muslim candidate to the mayoralty of New York, where the Twin Towers were infamously destroyed in the horrific 9/11 attack, whereas Zoran was 9 at the time. Mamdani, for his part, distinguished himself through the campaign as being the only candidate who would be able to, quote, stand up to Donald Trump, who did not join ranks with Trump over on the fervent militarization of the police, on xenophobia towards NYC's proud and vast network of migrant communities, and who did not condone the White House's 75-year mandate to destroy the Palestinian nation for the benefit of Zionist colonialism. Trump admitted that Mamdani had a good chance of winning on the eve of the election while threatening to cut federal funding for NYC, but threw his support behind the Democratic Party boss, Andrew Cuomo, all the time. With a veritable triumph on Election Day, thanks in no small part to NYC's ranked choice voting, as well as the candidate himself, Mamdani declared, "President Trump, I know you're listening. Turn up the volume." Okay, so kind of stopping there for a second, I do want to comment on this for a second. We do discuss Zoran Mamdani in my in this segment coming up with Monty, but I do want to just say something real fast. I don't hate Zoran Mamdani, and in fact, I think he can do a lot of good for New York City, but I will continue to maintain that Zoran Mamdani is not the end-all be-all of the working class movement, and if anything, he's a tiny speck in the movement as it moves forward towards socialism. Mamdani is not a socialist. I've heard a lot of different people say that Mamdani is a socialist. He's not. He's a Dem sock at most, I would say. He is running in the Democratic Party as Democratic candidate. He ran in the primary. He is running for a bourgeois party, and he won for a bourgeois party. We must not forget this. I know it can be really, really easy to get wrapped up in the Mamdani mayhem and say, oh, well, he's such an amazing speaker, he's got so many good qualities, yada, yada, yada. Okay, yeah. But in the building up to an independent working class movement, why is he working with the Democrats? I do think that we need to actually critically analyze this. There are many different angles that we must look at this through to truly, I think, understand what is the angle here. If Zoran Mamdani was really trying to represent the working class, why is he running in the Democratic Party? The Democratic Party has shown consistently that it takes any kind of progressiveness. We can see this with AOC, Bernie, anyone in the squad. They take that progressive momentum and energy, and then they completely fizzle it. They defang it, they declaw it, they make it essentially nothing. And this is not. I want people to continue to remember that the Democratic Party has never and will never serve your best interest as a working person. We can see a lot of the things that Mamdani is going to do good as it pertains to being the mayor of New York. But we also have to remember who Mamdani is. And the fact is that we actually don't know him. We don't know him personally. We're not his friends. We're not his wife. We're not his family. Zoran Mamdani is a politician, first and foremost. He's not, and he has, once again, really good qualities, but you must continue to stay, if anything, critical. Continue to stay critical. And so moving forward. In the weeks following his victory, Mamdani has conducted community work, feeding disadvantaged children of working families, and responded positively to Donald Trump's overtures for a meeting to, quote, work something out. Between the two ostensibly opposed New York politicians, the meeting was popularly lambasted, noted for a bizarrely candid and seemingly chummy tone. As reporters grilled Mamdani on the very method of his transit from NYC to DC, scathing him for his using air travel over a bus or train, not that it fucking matters, who cares, Trump strangely jumped to defend him, citing the impracticality of driving from New York City to D.C. if only someone was around to break such a shoddy system and its infrastructure. More telling was the press dart throwing on Mamdani's bandying of the word fascist to describe Trump. Although Mamdani laughed sheepishly and began to rattle off a diplomatic answer, Trump interrupted and said, "That's okay, you can just say yes, I don't mind. It's easier than explaining. And I've been called worse than a despot." The lack of denial should be incredibly alarming. No politician with a claim to democratic legitimacy should feel comfortable being compared to the most barbarous and bloodthirsty manifestation of capitalist decay. Although, during Mamdani's campaign, Trump speculated that he would not get along with him and Mamdani on the issue of crime. During their meeting at the White House, Trump seemingly changed his tune and said, "I would feel very safe in New York with Mamdani in office." Throughout the conference, both Trump and Mamdani shied away from confrontation and emphasized their, quote, common ground. With Trump on several occasions making comments like "I think he's going to surprise a lot of conservative people. Some of his ideas are actually ideas that I have. We agree on a lot more than I would have thought. And I see myself helping more than hurting him." The last quotation was in reference to the possibility of Trump cutting federal funding for NYC. It is important to note that Trump highlighted it as a possibility but downplayed the probability before Mamdani has officially entered office. Mamdani, in turn, could not bring himself to say that New Yorkers love Trump, but did admit that more New Yorkers voted for Trump in 2024 than against 2020 because of issues like affordability. While this is true, it has not been joined with a repudiation from Trump's right-wing demagoguery, while policies like tariffs and why can't I not read today? and inflationary spending have actually driven up the cost of living, which is inevitable in the death throes of a capitalist system under this administration. So, stopping it there, what is the overall analysis here of the Trump and Mamdani meeting? Okay, what are my thoughts? I would say, first and foremost, I don't really care that Trump met with Mamdani, because, I mean, New York City does receive a lot of federal funding, so it makes sense that he did this. But, I mean, it just kind of goes to show that, like, first of all, if there's one thing that Donald Trump loves, it's celebrity. He really doesn't actually have a policy other than making a lot of money and being a pedophile, allegedly. You know, like, and celebrities. Like, he really likes people who are popular, who are like the it girl, you know? And that's what Mamdani is right now. He is the it girl. So I would say that my overall thoughts here on this meeting are, you know, we still have a lot to see. There's a lot to come on this subject. I think that, once again, this is not going to be anything of consequence to the working people, as capitalism is still allowed to be instituted as our economic policy and our economic mode of production and system. I think that Mamdani, once again, can alleviate certain pressures from working people, such as city-run grocery stores, which is great. But I also think that it's important to recognize that there are a lot of constraints. Mamdani ran on a very populist campaign and populist line, which rang, like, a lot of Americans really felt connected to that. I would say that, honestly, the best move that Mamdani could make in the coming years of him being the mayor is to eventually break with the Democratic Party And if he's really serious about this, which I fear that he probably is not going to do this, but if he is as serious as he says about making New York City affordable and, being a representative of the people, he will eventually have to break with the Democratic Party should he not want to lose what what he has essentially already as momentum for being basically like a neo-Bernie. I would say that Mamdani, he's got the sauce. He does. But can he actually stand by that? As a Democrat, no. The answer is no. They will always co-opt any progressiveness that you have entering the party. If he wants to actually make a real splash, a real change, if he wants to create momentum and movement, the best thing that he can honestly do for himself and the working people of America is to split off from the Democratic Party when he's gotten the traction that he needs and creating a working class party, a working movement for working people. He's got this clout, he's got the sauce. I think that if he can I would say that if he can do even half of what he's promising to do while he's the mayor, and he can continue to have a similar reputation by the time he's done, and if anything has grown it or will have grown it to being something even more progressive and socialist and militant, then I think that he could really, this kind of movement could really get working people, in a cohesive party and an actual coalition and an actual working movement against capital and against the bourgeois class. But I really suspect that that's not what's going to happen. I would say that Mamdani, he's not our guy, is the thing. He's their guy. He's their guy posing as our guy. And if he is our guy, then he will have to prove it further. Because currently, I'm not convinced. I don't care what Hassan Piker says. I don't care what the Majority Report says. I don't care what Chapo Trap House has to say about it. Because none of these people are communist. None of these people are principled in that way. They want to, they're all revisionist in some way or another, thinking that you can reform your way out of the system. You can't. That's not how this works. Mamdani is going to be co-opted by the Democratic Party. He already has been. He is already moving back on a lot of his previous positions. And just because he tweeted one time, globalize the Intifada, really doesn't actually mean jack shit. So, keep that in mind. But with all of that said, I would say that if Mamdani can deliver even half of what he has promised to deliver for New York residents and people of New York, the people of New York, as their mayor, I think that's a win for the people of New York. But remember, he is the mayor of New York, and he is in the Democratic Party. And he has met with Donald Trump, which, he kind of had to do that. I don't think it really matters all that much, because once again, Trump just likes whoever's in front of him, who's like a new shiny thing that he sees as like, he likes a winner and he likes a celebrity. He's a very simple man. And so kind of the closing remarks here. Well, the great banality in a pleasant meeting between two guys, quote, two guys from Queens, as the New York Times reported, this banality in its advertisement is a rosy screen door to the carnal house of capitalism, the home of genocide as we see in the Congo, Sudan, Palestine, and beyond, the inexorable misery and instability of all working people. In the dark times we live in, any ray of hope is welcome, and in the absence at this moment of a revolutionary working class movement, we are in danger of deception at times from perhaps earnest but doomed reformers, as reform is itself doomed. Mamdani is a step in the right direction, but the destination of social emancipation will not be reached until the poisonous thorns of electoralism, respectability, compromising, only to increasingly reactionary status quo, are consciously ripped away as a conscious, organized, and revolutionary working class movement that is not disappointed and betrayed by those who must smile and shake hands with the ugly, ravenous monster of capitalism. Okay, folks, so that is the end of this news segment. Thank you for joining me here in my apartment for this episode. I'm going to go ahead and switch it over now to the segment I did with Comrade Monty on the need for an independent revolutionary working class movement. Thank you once again for listening, and I will see you all next week for the Liberation Hour. Bye!
Okay. Um, so my name is Monty Sportello. I am a cadre member of the American Party of Labor. Uh, I live in the New York area. So I've been around a good amount of the Mamdani hype, and yeah, we're here to talk about it a little bit today.
Yeah, so this is kind of a discussion that's in the backdrop of the need for a militant, independent, working class party. And we're going to be talking about Mamdani. We're also going to be talking about Graham Plattner. And more importantly, we're going to be discussing the definitions and the understandings that we should have of opportunism and entryism, um, because these are two really important, um, necessary things to understand as we build this working class movement, and to know, who are the wolves in the sheep's clothing, what exactly is, what are these things, and what are these terms, and how can we correctly apply them and understand them in the larger scheme of things. So, um, to begin, I have this cute little slide here, but I'm going to go ahead and move over here. So, what is the need for an independent working class party? I have a picture of the old Bolsheviks up here. You have the likes of Lenin, Stalin, um, the other many Bolsheviks that were in the party at the time. Comrade, what would you say is the need for an independent working class party? Like, why do we need this as opposed to working with the Democrats?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is that the Democrats are a bourgeois party, right? They haven't ever represented the interests of the working class. It doesn't. I would argue that they will never represent the interests of the working class. Uh, they, if you listen to like the stated leadership, right? Like, so Mamdani gets is mayor elect now, and we get Kathy Hochul. She's the person right above him, right? And not that long ago, some young person uh, in a Q&A was very politely saying, "Oh, lots of young people are disillusioned with capitalism. They're interested in socialism. What do you have to say about that?" And she's just like, we're capitalists, right? That's at the end of the day, that's just,
Boo.
it is what it is. It is what they are, right? And
Yeah.
so uh, I don't think that there's any useful uh, way, or like the long term strategy cannot be infiltrate the Democratic Party to push for reforms, right? Um,
Right.
one thing, a way to frame it, I think, uh, that I think is maybe a little bit more useful is, let's think about any gain that the working class has ever gotten: the 8 hour workday, abolition of child labor, right?
Hmm.
Can you think of a politician associated with those things?
Not particularly.
Right, because we didn't get those things by electing the right guy to push for those reforms, right? We got
Hmm.
those things through organized militant struggle. Uh,
Yeah.
Even without a unified party, at this time, when the Haymarket Affair happened, right? Like, we didn't have a unified working class like communist party, right? There were a couple things. There's the Social Democratic Party, and then there was the Socialist Party, right? But like, these weren't like big, powerful, unified parties that were running uh, people into like the Senate or for mayors and stuff like that. I mean, we did have some socialist mayors in like Milwaukee, for example. But I don't think at that time, or like right around that time, maybe. But that was not the reason why we got the 8-hour workday or these reforms. It was because an organized working class movement fought for them, rioted, uh, shut down factories, went on strikes, right? It had
Period.
nothing to do with electing the right guy, right?
No, exactly. And I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Comrade.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's important to recognize this because, there's been a lot of excitement around electoralism recently with the most recent elections early this month. And I can understand why people are so excited. There was some good outcomes that happened. The crowning jewel of which I would say was the election of Mayor Zoran Mamdani to the mayoral office in New York. A lot of people were really excited about that. He has good policies. I won't take that away from him. I'll give him his flowers there. And he ran a really good campaign. He ran a really down to earth campaign. But we cannot let this blind us in the larger struggle for a working class movement. And I think it's important for people to understand that Zoran Mamdani is not a representation of that working class movement. Zoran Mamdani is a representation of the Democratic Party. He has chosen this representation as he ran in their primary. He didn't have to do that necessarily. He chose to. He chose to run as a Democrat, even though he himself has stated that he identifies as a democratic socialist, which is a revisionist point of view in like the socialist world. Um, we are communists and we are anti-revisionist communists, meaning we believe in revolution. Part of the reason, or I would say one of the main reasons we believe in this, is because of the fact that reform has never and will never work. Reform within the capitalist system is essentially allowing for bourgeois elements to enter back into our revolutionary movement and causing us to become complacent and give concessions to the capitalists, which we cannot afford nor should we make.
So I want to give like kind of push back a little bit on that because okay, what our movement is, right? What it should be is the the movement of the like, revolutionary self-activity of the working class, the working class becoming conscious of itself and its place in history and the power that it holds, right? Reforms themselves are not concessions to or conciliation with the bourgeoisie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that those reforms need to come from the revolutionary self activity of the working class. They
Right.
cannot and will not be the handouts of elected bourgeois politicians who are not accountable to the people. They are only accountable to the like the bourgeois establishment, their lobbyists, and their funders, etc.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's, the thing about Zoran Mamdani is that I don't believe, is funded by any major corporations, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm glad that he's not funded by these groups. It obviously shows that he is at least somewhat committed to his agenda. And as you said, comrade, reform is not in itself necessarily bad, and was mistaken when I was making my point. I would say, in an amendment to what I was saying, we cannot necessarily just only rely on reform as a means to our ends of revolutionary working class movement.
Right, yeah. So like reform can't be the end all be all. We cannot reform ourselves out of capitalism. Um, you know, the reformist social democratic movement has been ongoing, in the US since the 1890s. Um, and around like a little bit longer than that in Europe, right? And
Hmm.
we're still like, oh, we got one mayor, one reformist mayor, and a couple reformist senators or Congress people, but that's about it, right? And I know that uh, the thing that the DSA types love to harp on is like, oh, like the people aren't ready for revolution yet. What is your party? Blah blah blah. Whatever that party is, whoever is criticizing them, right? What are they doing, right? And saying like one like asserting that getting a bourgeois politician elected is doing something for the movement, right? I would argue that it's not doing a ton. And then two is that they're like using that as the metric uh, to judge any organization by, right? I mean, hell, like organizations like the PSL even are like, oh, we're running our candidate for president and for this or that or the other uh, thing, and they know that that's like a totally lost cause because they're running as like a third party and everything, right? But
Right.
I think that maybe it's a good idea to actually say like what is the strategy and tactics of the working class movement the of a Bolshevik style party, right? Like if we're not worried about electing uh, people into bourgeois parliament uh, or senate or anything or like positions of power, right? If that's
Hmm.
not what we're doing, then what are we doing, right?
No,
Because
exactly.
that's the question that most people have, and a lot of people aren't able to give a concise answer to that, right?
Right. No, most certainly.
So
And I
go
think that the important part to understand here is that the Bolsheviks, and I would say Lenin more specifically, understood that. But I mean, also the other Bolsheviks. Lenin, of course, was not the only smart, talented communist among them. There were many. But as the leader of the movement at the time, um, Lenin had talked about the fact that if and the Bolsheviks at large, if you can make strides in doing and supporting certain reforms for the working class, then that's one thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be building up the also underground parts of the movement and realizing that like there will come a time in which the class struggle has to happen. It's not avoidable. It's not something that you can just say, okay, well, we can just get rid of class if we work within the capitalist system to get rid of it. That's not how it works. That's never how it's worked. um, there is this understanding that there needs to be these two sides to it where, yeah, we operate in, what we would call like a legal sense. But also in like another, on the other side of that, we're also operating and preparing the working people to actually build that militant movement, and to actually build up the movement outside of the already built institutions of like the Democratic Party. Um, because we have to remember the Democratic Party have been around since what 1825 or something. You know, they like I know they've been around for centuries at this point. They are not going to change. They were built specifically as a bourgeois party. This is not there. There is no like I see a lot of people getting super excited over people in the squad, like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. And I can understand why people want to be excited over these politicians. But we have to remember that they still are operating within the Democratic Party framework, um, and are very much showing it. AOC is like the one that comes to mind most specifically. She came in on a very radical agenda and platform and has been essentially, if she ever was, I don't know if she ever really was that much of a formidable opponent looking back now, but has been completely declawed and defanged and is just a shill for the party at this point. And and because that's what the Democratic Party does, is they they take in more, they want to co-opt more, um, I guess, radical elements of a left movement and say, no, 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 just come over here. You can operate within our framework. We have all of this money and support, and you can get your agenda done this way. And many fall for it, thinking that, well, they have all of this influence. I can, perhaps we can make a change here. Evidently not every single time.
Right. I mean, so that's like the function of any bourgeois party. Uh, I think maybe we should talk about like what specifically though does it mean to build a working class party?
Right. No,
Uh,
I agree.
so so there are a couple things. Uh, so like what is the difference between the tactics and strategy of the Mensheviks, the RSDLP, uh, that being the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, that split into the Bolsheviks split from, right, and the Bolsheviks themselves, right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's that generally what the Menshevik style parties, which I think is the style of most modern like quote unquote communist parties, like the ones that aren't um, actively doing like reformism, like the DSA,
Mm-hmm.
uh, are like more in line with the Menshevik style of organizing than the Bolsheviks, right? So what the Mensheviks were essentially doing is that they knew from Marx and the theory that they had been developing that capitalism itself is untenable, prone to crisis, uh, unstable, right? And especially um, the type of uh, system that they had in Russia, right? That being like this not quite capitalist, still czarist, with like some small spurts and movements towards uh, developing a capitalist system, but
Mm-hmm.
without like a strong bourgeois political apparatus, right? And
Right.
so some of the Mensheviks were more revolutionary than others. Like they believed that they could, get to the revolution and do socialism, but most of them believed, that they would uh, be like leaders of the bourgeois revolution. Um, but their strategy for this was basically the belief that uh, capitalism is prone to crisis, and in those moments of crisis, there will be spontaneous uprisings by the working class and the peasantry,
Right.
and that uh, by agitating for more class consciousness among the working class and the peasantry, that they could affect those spontaneous uprisings and like influence them to spill over into revolution, right?
Right.
But what Lenin says, and why he split from the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party and started the Bolshevik Party, was that you is that the working class movement, or the vanguard of the working class, right? This is a group of people that do exist, right? It's not that there is so there's a confusion among the left or whatever that like uh, it's a tendency that I would call vanguardism rather than like Marxism Leninism, where
Mm-hmm.
they just believe that having a party called the Vanguard Party is sufficient enough and will it's basically still just Menshevism, but like using
Right.
Bolshevik rhetoric, right? Fuck, my foot's falling asleep. Uh, but basically, what Lenin says is that the vanguard exists, right? The vanguard
Right.
are those most class conscious and most conscious and most active organizers of their class, right? So every class has a vanguard, right?
Hmm.
The capitalists have a vanguard, right? You think about
Right.
like who is the vanguard of the capitalist class, right? It's
Right.
people like Epstein. It's
Right.
people like the mafia at certain points in history, right? It because the interest of the working class is to extract more value from the working class, oppress them more efficiently, right? Uh,
Hmm.
and launder the money that you exploit from them, launder the value that you exploit to them more effectively so that even the most meager reforms cannot reach your wealth, right? So the criminal, the like criminal element of the bourgeoisie are the vanguard of the bourgeoisie, right? They are
Right.
constantly innovating new ways of exploiting labor and hiding wealth, right? So who are the vanguard of the working class, right? The vanguard of the working class exists today, right? It just doesn't have a party, at least not in the United States, right? The vanguard of the working class are those class conscious, Marxist, grassroots organizers that are active in their communities, active in their tenants unions, active in the mutual aid societies, active in all kinds of grassroots political movements, fighting for better working conditions, better wages, and better benefits for their people while advocating against imperialism,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Those people exist, right? You can go out and you can find those people, you can meet those people, right? So the point of the party is to rally those most active and most uh, conscious
Hmm.
organizers of our class into a centralized force that can be aimed at the weakest links of capital, right? So the whole
Right.
of the working class is a spear, right? And the party is the point, right? And so all we
Period.
have to do is find the eye slit in or the chinks in the armor, the eye slits, the the uh, the creases under the armpit of the capitalist beast, right?
Hmm.
And fell it, right?
No,
So
exactly.
how do we?
Go
Yes.
ahead. Go ahead. No, you're good.
But how do we do this, right? Like, what does this mean practically, right? Because it's like a lot of flowery language. It's a good idea, right? It sounds good, but like, how do you do that, right?
Right.
What you do, what should be done, and it's easier said than done. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, and it's not easy to do it if you're working full time, you're always exhausted, right? But
Hmm.
what needs to be done is you join the party that you believe is the Bolshevik party, right? The party that has good uh, democratic centralist values, right? I
Hmm.
would like to talk about democratic centralism, but I think a different comrade of ours might be better suited
Yeah.
for it.
No,
Um,
no. If you want to explain it real fast.
right. So democratic centralism is essentially uh, diversity in thought, unity in action, right? So we can, well, the party will have a program and a platform, and you'll have to accept that program of the party. But like within the broad program of the party, right? Like, uh, you have like lots of leeway in disagreement about what how we should implement things, what can and can't be done, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then once a decision is decided on, or once a decision is made, you like cannot go against that decision in both your actions and your rhetoric, right?
Right.
Not until that decision is being reflected on by the party, and then you can voice your concerns with it and things like that, right?
No,
Now,
exactly.
a
Yeah.
thing to consider when we're talking about like democratic centralism or democracy of a party, when you're determining a party, which party you should join, is the ways that they take votes and the ways that they count democracy, right? So
Hmm.
there are different types of democracy, right? So like, what is it? Round robin voting. Uh, Sorry, I am just going to pull up some different types of there. So there's robin voting, there, which is like a kind of tournament style voting.
Hmm.
There's what is it that New York City just recently this is uh New York City is this is basically what got Zoran elected, is it ranked choice
Yeah.
voting, right?
Ranked choice
So
voting.
so yeah, so I believe in the APL we have round robin and ranked choice voting. Uh, in some other parties, right, they'll have things like slate voting, right?
Hmm.
Uh, it'll be different kinds of voting that styles of voting that can either like make like that can either inhibit democracy or promote it, right? And so
Right.
like it is that ranked choice voting that allowed democracy, like the election that we just had in New York City, to be more democratic and get Mamdani into office, right? Which, like, I know that we have all these criticisms. I do think that it's a good thing Mamdani was elected, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, nobody wanted fucking Cuomo, and nobody really wanted Sliwa, or you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we're much better off with him in office than someone else, right? It's just that we shouldn't trick ourselves into believing that he is one of us, right? A radical, a communist, right? He will be called a radical communist by his deposers, but he is beholden to a political system uh, that you have to play like a game, right? And
Yeah.
you know whether or not you can like fault him for it or whatever, it's up to your point of view, right? I for me, I'm a cynic, and like I always was like, yeah, he seems like a nice guy, not something I could ever know, but uh at the end of the day, he's running for an elected office uh, in the most moneyed city in America. Um, the best that we can hope for is that he keeps one of his promises, right? If he does
Right.
that, I'm happy, right? But I think we got off a little bit off track, right? So there's a thing called like slate voting, which is
Hmm.
kind of popular in uh, a lot of contemporary quote unquote communist parties. I'm not
Right.
gonna like name names of the parties that use this, but basically what slate voting is the leadership of the party picks a slate of who is going to occupy the various positions of the party, right? Like that being general
Right.
secretary, the treasurer, blah blah blah, the central committee, all that stuff, right? So the leadership of the party decides that, and then the party rank and file can vote yes or no.
Okay.
Right. So then if the party vote, if the rank and file all vote no, then they pick a new slate and then the voting happens again.
I
Right.
see.
Uh, can you like see like what may be the issue with that?
Oh, most certainly. Well, the fact that the leadership even gets to pick who we vote for, that's a little bit um that's I to the I'm not sure how much I can fuck with that.
Right. So like what would be the use to in your head, like if you just think about like the like why that might be the case. When would that be acceptable?
I would say slate voting might be acceptable in, I don't know, a situation of like, I don't know. I would say like I could see it being acceptable if like we were in the midst of like a conflict and needed to like get people elected to lead a situation. But I'm not sure. What do you think? I really don't know. I'm
You're pretty much spot on, right? It's if the party becomes illegal and you have to go completely underground, then slate voting is like it, that is how it came into being. It's like sort of in like popular use with parties, like is that Red Scare happens, crackdown on all the communist parties happens, and then they they'll like switch to slate choice so that no one can become a leadership of the party who isn't already trusted by leadership, right? So if you're really concerned with infiltration, right?
right, right.
If you're in a guerrilla war sort of movement, right? Those are the two situations where ranked choice voting is an acceptable thing to do, right?
Or slate voting.
Oh
So
yeah,
you said,
slate voting.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Ranked choice voting is good. Is good. It is more democratic. Uh,
right. No,
right.
and
So
I think it's important to recognize that, especially the democratic elements of communist parties, because it's one of the most misunderstood parts of communist movements is how the democracy actually works and how it functions. And I should mention that democracy is not perfect because humans are not perfect, and it's not going to be a perfect system all around all the time. But it's democracy is one of those things that we've realized is still an important element, a very important element of building a society. You know, and like having a like having a state, having a party, and it's why we're even talking about it because it's like if we're going to have an independent militant working class movement and a working class party or even a coalition, democracy has to be involved. It has to be one of the pillars of that movement. Otherwise, it's doomed from the beginning. And that's why it's one of the most important aspects of party and movement building.
right. So this goes like perfectly into the next thing that we should be talking about is like what is the purpose or like what are should be our goals as communists building a working class movement in America as Bolshevik style communists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and what is like the goal of socialism generally, right? Because we could say that ancient Greek democracy was democracy for the slaveholders, right? And then uh, that gets expanded, right? When the transition happens to feudalism and then it becomes democracy for the aristocracy, right? Because it's more people get access to democracy through that uh, through this like court system, right? And then you get capitalism, which then becomes democracy for the capitalists, right?
Mm-hmm.
They expand democracy, they tear it away from the bourgeois, from the aristocracy, and they give it to a larger group of people, a larger class of the class of the bourgeoisie. And now we have our historic moment where we are it is our turn to rip democracy away from the capitalists, from the bourgeoisie, and expand democracy towards all of the working people, right? And
Right.
so in our organizing, right, as communists,
Hmm.
our task is to become active in all of uh, the different working class organizations, whether that be that we start new working class organizations in our areas, right? We start tenant unions, we start mutual aid societies, we start, um, you know, organizations fighting for uh, even reforms, right? Like
Right.
specific reforms for an industry of workers, like home health. Like there's an organization in New York City called No More 24. And New York City is the only city in America where the 24-hour workday is legal for home health attendants.
Ah.
Um, right, and so there's a big movement to end that, and these are very forward thinking, class conscious people that are spearheading this movement, right? So you either start organizations like these, or you join those organizations and you become reliable faces in that movement. People, you study, right? That's very important. You study the history of the movement, you study the theory, right? And people
Hmm.
won't always agree with you, but if you are consistent in your study, in studying and developing your theoretical knowledge, and if you're consistent in showing up and being there, being the person who says, "Yeah, I can do that. I can help out." And it's not about recognition. It's not about being appreciated, right? You're going to feel like you're not appreciated a ton, right? You're going to do things and never get credit, right? But that
Right.
doesn't fucking matter. You go, you show up, you do the good work, and eventually people will recognize you as someone that they can trust, someone that they respect, and you can in that like in being that person, right? You can
Hmm.
offer, hey, we're holding I'm hosting a study group, right? We're reading Capital, we're reading State and Revolution, right? We're reading Foundations of Leninism. uh it's at my apartment or at this coffee shop or in this park or whatever, right? And you can invite those people, and because this is the thing, you aren't going to, like, you might get like just from flyering or going or posting online that you are hosting a reading group or whatever, right?
Right.
um and you might get a handful of people, but you don't know how reliable or useful, right? Like, and I don't want to be like utilitarian or whatever, right? But how useful those people are, right? That uh, you could get somebody who loves to read, but they aren't going to show up to the tenants' rights um, rally, or like
Right.
show up to help like prevent a landlord from evicting a family, right? But if you are with those people from the jump, and then you say you invite those people, and before you invite them, you have gained their respect, you've shown yourself as being a competent and reliable ally, then
Hmm.
they are more likely to show up and more likely to give a shit about what you have to say, right? You're not going to like win them over immediately, right? But some of these people may then join the party, right?
Well, it's essentially building up social credit with people to show that you're not just here to be a shill or here to be a basically. like co-opt a movement. You're actually here to do the work on the ground, and that's the thing is I think it's really important to recognize as we go into the discussions of opportunism and entryism, is that, you know, I feel like a lot of people are acting as though we know people like Mamdani, like we know them, and that they're like, oh well, he's a great guy. You don't actually know this person. He's not your best friend. You know, he has put out some great advertisements and everything, but we don't actually know him. You know, when we're building a movement like this, we also need to remember that building social credit with people and having and building those trust, that trust between folks that we can actually rely on one another, is extremely important. This isn't to say that Mamdani hasn't necessarily done that. He has done that in a specific kind of way. You know, he's talked about going on a hunger strike with taxi drivers and everything to for their I believe it was for their right to unionize, or it was something else they were fighting for, but it was something along those lines, which is great. I think that really does show that he's you know, he's been part of the struggle, but that doesn't mean that we cannot dish out our own skepticisms on his running in the Democratic Party. And as it pertains to the need for an independent working class party, it's extremely important, as Monty was saying, to build those relationships, to show people that you're actually doing the thing, doing the work, showing up to tenants' rights meetings, organizing protests and demonstrations, organizing reading groups, showing that you're being consistent. This is an extremely important part. You know, we can study all we like and we can read, and that's an extremely important part of being a Marxist. But the other half of that is actually going out and doing it, you know, and actually being part of the movement. You know, you can only do so much from the comfort of your own home. You actually do have to get out there and be part of things. And if you're someone who's scared or nervous about doing that because you don't know people, or you feel as though it would be hard to start your own movement where you are, connecting with people online, for example, is a great tool. That's how a lot of people find the APL, is through, like, you know, the internet. In addition, finding you know, what small organizations or organizing might be happening in your area, through trusted friends and everything. There are ways in which people can find these movements, and in some cases, starting one of your own may be the way forward. You know, these are important aspects to organizing an independent working class movement. And I would say that, like, one of my biggest critiques, and we'll get into this as we go into the other discussions on entryism and opportunism, with people like Mamdani, like Graham Plattner, like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. Graham Plattner is more separate from these people, A, because he's not elected, and B, because he's like actually a war criminal. But like, basically, you know, these people can say things all they want. You know, they can say as much shit as they want about how they care about the working class and material conditions and blah, 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 blah. That doesn't actually mean that they're doing the thing. You know, that doesn't actually mean that that's what they're fighting for, because AOC has talked time and time again about material conditions and a working class movement and blah, 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 blah. But when push comes to shove, she still fights for the same democratic policy as Hakeem Jeffries in many cases. You know, she's not telling people to primary Hakeem Jeffries. Her and Mamdani, I believe, have both jumped on that train of don't primary him. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah, Mamdani, I think, just said today that he would support Hakeem Jeffries if he wanted to become Speaker of the House or something.
Which is the kind of behavior that we need to be critiquing. That's the kind of tendency that we need to be critiquing. I'm not saying, and you know, I'm just going to move the slide on to. I'm not saying. Let me just do this. Here we go. I'm not saying that Zoran Mamdani does not have great qualities about him that can really add to the lives of working class New Yorkers. Fast and free buses are a great thing, objectively. I fully support that. You know, having city-run grocery stores is a great thing. You know,
Free buses, not gonna happen. City run grocery stores might, and I think if that's the one promise he keeps, hell yeah. I'm like, I'm basically like, you know what? Uh, good enough as far as like a bourgeois mayor goes, right?
And and that's the thing is, okay, I need to get on my soapbox real fast because this has been pissing me off. This has been pissing me off so much. And I always put my videos in the Hatsanabe Discord, so I know I'm gonna get some shit for this opinion. But Hassan is fucking wrong. Hassan is absolutely fucking wrong about Zoran Mamdani. Zoran Mamdani is not a socialist. He is a democratic socialist. He is not like a communist. Just because he tweeted one time, globalize the intifada, doesn't mean jack. That doesn't mean shit. And I'm tired. I'm so over it with giant, with big popular creators like Hassan Piker, who I should mention, I have been an avid watcher of the Hassan broadcast for years at this point. I'm not unfamiliar. I have been in I've been in the community, you know. I'm not ignorant to this. I have heard many a time him talk about these things, not clipped out of context, but in full context of what he is talking about. And I can say with full with all I can just say 100% that Zoran Mamdani is not a fucking commie. You know, he's not out here going to be winning tons of reforms and spearheading a working class movement. He has already capitulated on so many things. He's already brought Obama staffers into the mix of his into his like his transition team and everything, and as advisors and stuff. This is not a person that is going to, like, we cannot put all of our hopes and dreams onto this guy because he put out a good ad or he said something that, you know, that made us go, ooh, he said the material conditions word. Whoa. Like, just because he's saying the rhetoric doesn't mean jack if he's not actually doing the thing. And I get very, very frustrated at Hassanabi heads and at Hassan Piker himself for, you know, using his giant platform to not necessarily advocate further for a working class movement, but to prop up Democrats like AOC and Zoran Mamdani and think that that's good enough. Sorry, I just had to get that off my chest.
No, you're good. I'm gonna be real with you, player. I never have ever seen an episode of, or whatever it's called. I don't know. I guess they're not episodes
Of Hassan Piker.
Yeah.
Well, so I would say for any listeners who perhaps don't know who Hassan Piker is, I'm sure you probably do kind of know who he is, comrade. He's a leftist Twitch streamer. You know, he got really big, I would say, like 2020. Like, he was already pretty big before that. But like he's just been growing and growing, you know, as more people become disillusioned with capitalism. And he has, like, I will say he has had some good moments. I'll give him that. But he has had some really not good moments as well. And I would say, like, his positions on Zoran Mamdani kind of have been, I kind of really got into socialist politics because of Hassan Piker. I started watching Hassan Piker to understand socialist politics more, and I have very much moved beyond him. But I started watching Hassan Piker when I was like a freshman in college. And I would say that as an entry point, he's a great resource for people to kind of understand like what is like a broader leftist position on things like regular news stories and events. But I would say, as a principled socialist, he is not a good. He's not a very good, I could say, a gateway into that. You still should read Lenin. You still should read Marx. You know, Hassan Piker has been known to try to use people, like, invoke like the words of Lenin to get people to vote for the Democratic Party and everything, which is just fucking ridiculous. And his positions on Zoran, I would say, have gotten a little bit dogmatic. And I don't think that he's critical enough And one of my biggest complaints with the Hasanabi broadcast more generally, not to get too off topic here, is that he tends to love to punch left, and he loves to get on his more leftist viewership about holding him accountable for things and positions, and gets fucking pissed at people when they don't mirror his positions, which are once again not revolutionary. I would say I would call more demsock than anything else. Um, Bringing it back to entryism and Zoran Mamdani, um, you know, his policies, like, you said fast and free buses are like not going to be possible. Like, why is that?
Kathy Hochul basically said it's not going to happen. And, like, I mean, unless Zoran and his team, like, are just so smooth, unless he, like, is, like, a fucking gigolo for her and fucking like like I don't know. I don't know, does something create like does pull something out of his ass to like, you know, uh change her mind or something, which I just don't really see happening. Then it's not gonna happen. He's not in charge of it.
Right. And I would say that like it's one of those things that, like, if he can do it, fucking baller. Happy for him. But socialism is not when fast and free buses. That's probably like part of like a socialist policy. But like socialism is not, oh well, now we have city run grocery stores. Yay. Like there's a lot more that goes into this. And so I would say it's a good idea. How would we define like entryism?
Entryism is when uh, members of either of a different organization or people of with a set ideology join a different organization with a different ideology in mass uh, with the express for the express purpose of changing the ideological framework or the policies of that organization or destroy the organization. Um, and like historically, like if we look at like the history of entryism, right? Like the Trotskyist movement is very famous for this. What happens when Trotskyists do entryism into, say, the French Communist Party or the American Socialist Party, right? Uh, they just destroy that party, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the goal, that's the thing. It's like none of these people are, and I don't think that they should be, right? But none of these like DSA people are accelerationists, right?
No.
Their goal is not to destroy the Democratic Party. Um, their goal uh, is to try to use the Democratic Party as a vehicle for them to pass progressive reforms, right? And
Right.
not that like none of that can happen at all, but it's a slow, it's a Sisyphean feat, right? Like just you're gonna push this rock up a hill
Mhm.
and keep pushing it every single day, and when you wake up, you're back at the bottom of the hill, right?
Right. No, and that's, I would say, partially definitely what Zoran Mamdani is doing, which is and he hasn't necessarily explicitly said this at all, but it's definitely in kind of what he is trying to push. I would say he's also an opportunist, but I kind of put him here because he just got elected, as like an entryist, where he's trying to do a lot of change from the inside, and he's trying to enter into the Democratic Party as AOC did. There was that ad. Do you remember the AOC ad when she was initially running for Congress, where she's like, I don't believe in like or healthcare for all or something because I'm a liberal. I believe in it because I was a waitress, something along those lines. I could be completely misremembering, but
Yeah,
basically,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, the AOC ad went fucking hard at the time that it came out. Everyone was like losing their fucking minds over that. And look at where she is now. Like it's the same playbook, different person. You know, I would say, like, is AOC better than Chuck Schumer? Yeah, but that's a pretty low fucking bar to clear. You're not exactly like doing the best, doing the most when you're being at least better than Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, of which she is still supporting their reelection. Even though both of these people are shills for Israel, who is currently, a settler colonizer state and is, doing a genocide. And she has been also very weak sauce on that issue as well, as it relates to things like the genocide. Even Zoran Mamdani, who I would say has had a much more pointed stance on the genocide, is starting to concede, as he's been elected and everything. Keeping on the, what is it, the police commissioner Tish? Is that what she is?
Yeah.
Like that's a problem.
I have like a unique maybe view on that. Which like I don't think that it's like a good thing that she's the police commissioner or whatever, right?
Right.
Uh, but I do think okay, so we have to think about like what is the NYPD, right? They
Mm-hmm.
get training from the IDF, right? They are
Ugh.
essentially a paramilitary force in New York City, right? They may, on paper be beholden to the mayor or and whatever, right? But in reality, they have, the most powerful union in the fucking city, uh, and they have like military grade fucking arsenals, right? So
Right.
what do you do? So, like, you are a quote unquote socialist, right? Because like we agree that he's not a socialist, but
Right.
a Zionist will call him,
A
Stalin,
communist.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, right. So we'll give him that. We'll say, so you're a socialist. You become mayor of this city with the most armed police force possibly in the world, outside of Israel, I guess. Uh,
Right.
and you are wanting to, you know that you're not going to do a revolution, right? Like, he's going to hopefully get a couple terms and pass some, decent reforms, make the city more affordable. That's his goal, right? He wants to be a
Right.
LaGuardia type, right?
Right.
Now, do you fire the commissioner immediately, like after after having this campaign where everybody's calling you a communist? Do you fire your police commissioner immediately when, those are the people who have the power to make you not breathe anymore?
Right. No, that's a good point.
Right. So like I don't think that he's like keeping her on, or like I don't know what his motivation is, right? I'm not going to like say I know for a fact that that's his motivation, right? I
Hmm.
do know that one of the major contributing factors to the death of JFK was him firing Alan Dulles, as one of his
Uh,
that he did, right? You fire the director of the CIA and also tons of CIA agents. Uh, those people are mad and unemployed with a vast network uh, of assassins at their disposal, right?
yeah,
Uh,
no, that's a good point
right.
actually.
So, think about that, right? When you're saying, oh, you want him to be super radical, right? You know, I think, if he was like the radical mayor, right, then I think that, and he wanted to do that, then first, what he would have to do is establish a secret police force that is like answering to him and only him or his team, right? Now, like,
Right.
is he gonna do that? No. If he did it, people would freak out, right?
I think everyone in the country might lose their fucking minds if that happened. And I think that's a very good argument. I would say that, like, I'm only criticizing Zoran the way that I am because, well, A, because it's important to do critique, especially like self-critique. So, like that's just part of the game. But I would say also a big part of this is because we need to stay realistic and understanding exactly who this person is. I'm not saying that Zoran is like some evil person that's like, trying to infiltrate the movement and do terrible shit. I'm not going to take the Trotskyite position on that because that's stupid. But I am going to still be very critical of things that he does, especially because of the fact that he, in many ways, marketed himself as like dipping his toes into socialism and being, very like friendly to it and everything. Again, not a socialist, but someone who is friendly to it. And I would say someone who has done something similar, I would say to a much lesser, something that is, I would say he's done it in a less, what's the word? Anyway, Graham Plattner. He has not been as successful. Yes, he has not been as successful at this for many different reasons. But kind of moving into opportunism and understanding what that is. I've actually been reading a lot about this with Lenin and everything. Not with him; he's dead. But like his writings on it. And how let's before we get started into talking about Graham Plattner, because I tend to know more about a lot about this. I don't know how much you know about Graham Plattner, Comrade, but how would you define opportunism?
Um, Opportunism is a generally a right deviation, uh, where you are putting either your where someone is putting their personal reputation, their personal glory and politics above that of the party or the class.
Right. And I would say that Graham Plattner is an interesting case. He's running for a Senate seat in Maine, which is pretty, it doesn't actually fucking matter. But I would say there's been a lot of discourse, once again, in the Hasanabi sphere of influence around, and especially I would say in like the Majority Report, Chapo Trap House is another one. They're like a more leftist podcast. I would say more like DemSoc. But Graham Plattner is a dude running for a Senate seat in Maine. He is kind of marketing himself as this like no nonsense dude from Maine who's just, trying to, fight the oligarchy. And like that's very much taking like the AOC and Bernie line that they started like pushing, like the fight the oligarchy tour that they did after Trump got elected. You know, he's definitely been jumping on that bandwagon and pushing that with his campaigning to primary. Who I would say is it Susan Collins Senate seat? I could be very mistaken on that, but he's basically trying to challenge primary out the current person who is in that seat. I would say one of my biggest concerns with people and their support for Graham Plattner is basically just rejecting our anti-imperialist line. Because Graham Plattner, a little bit of background on him, he did multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. I would say 4 in total is how many tours he did, one of which was as a Blackwater mercenary. He also had a Totenkopf tattoo on his chest for 20 plus years. And at no point has he ever apologized for his military service or for the people that he has most certainly taken their lives. And in fact, he talks about his military service as if it was some kind of grandiose, amazing thing that he did. He said he's always wanted to, he was always waiting for his war since he was around 8 years old. And many such Reddit posts have come up of him discussing this position, as well as him being very open about the fact that he's happy that he killed people and he really liked it. And he was actually a guard at one of the notorious prisons, which was known for. Yep, yep. And people like Sam Cedar of the Majority Report, Emma Vigeland, more pointedly, has been very, I would say, wrong on this. Hassan Piker, to an extent, a lot of like the leftist influencers in that sphere of it, I would say, have been, for some reason, shilling for this guy. I don't know. I don't understand it. This is textbook opportunism right here.
Yeah, I've been seeing some Twitter posters who I generally like, be like, oh, I don't care about this, that, or the other thing as long as I get, you know, healthcare, or he pushes back against the Gaza genocide, or what the fuck ever. I don't even know what his. I honestly, I don't know what his like policies that he's running on actually are. Um,
Um,
I haven't
yeah,
paid that much attention.
yeah, he's mainly running on basically getting more money to people in the military, like reallocating funds, getting out of quote unquote like wars that we don't need to be in, which basically just means that he doesn't support the Iraq war, but he would definitely, if another Iraq war happened, he would support it. Like, that's just a
Right.
roundabout way. Like, every fucking Democrat says this shit, and Republican. They say this shit, and then another, like, and then another opportunity comes around to invade a communist country, or like a leftist country, or whatever the fuck, or a country with a lot of oil, more specifically, and all of a sudden it's like, no, we got to be there right now. We got to put troops on the ground. This is important. Like, like, this is the kind of person that he is running on like an anti-Israel platform, but I don't really think that means jack, to be frank, considering that he's been very open and proud about his service in Iraq and Afghanistan, in which he was specifically an infantry person. He was an infantryman. He was a Marine. That's an important point here. He wasn't just some kind of staff sergeant. He wasn't working on the base, but wasn't actually killing people. No, he was out there murking like 10-year-olds. Like, this is a guy.
So, so being like, I feel like being a staff sergeant or something like that, that's worse, right? Being like just a Marine grunt is like, it's not great, but like it is what it is.
Right.
It's like they don't have a lot of say in what's going on, right? Now,
No, that's a good point.
generally, I do think that people like that like to down, especially if they want to be, given some sort of credit on the left, they want to downplay their, their, you know, leadership, uh, you know,
Yeah, and I think it's important that, like, yeah, we do recognize that, like, doing intelligence and stuff like that is like way worse. And like, I was mistaken in like what I had said prior, that like, no, that's just as bad. And like, I should say again, I come from a biased position, because both of my parents were in the military. I grew up in the military. Like, that's
hmm.
like full stop. I grew up in the military. So like, I have a biased position on this, and it's not something I like or that I'm proud of. Like, I very much oppose the fact that like all of my parents were in the military. Like, I disagree with it. And I think it was wrong. But I also recognize that like it's one of the only reasons I'm able to go to college right now. And like, it is really important that I'm held accountable to that, because I can say stuff that's like, oh, wait, actually, that was wrong about, staff sergeants and everything.
Right, yeah. Those people have more responsibility than like a grunt or something like that. But yeah. The thing the point is that, these things with like positions in the military. Now, like just being like go back to Grand Plattner, just being a grunt in the Marines, whatever, right? I know that there are people in our party who uh, were in the military, had a change of heart, uh, very much are vocally anti military and stuff like that, um, anti imperialist and everything. Uh, and have become
Mhm.
communists later on, right? I that's a good thing generally, right?
Absolutely.
It's just
People
that
can change.
but there's a big difference between doing a tour, realizing that it was shitty, and getting out, and doing a tour, doing another tour, coming back, and like I recognize, it's hard to adjust, but then uh, joining Blackwater so that you can go kill for fun and profit, you know.
And that's kind of the big thing I want to highlight here is that a lot of people are trying to make the argument that Graham Plattner, um, he didn't have any other options as it came to like employment, and so he went and joined Blackwater because that's the only thing that he had a skill for. That's bullshit. That is not true. Graham Plattner comes from a very, like, I would not say super wealthy, but a wealthy family, all things considered. They
He's
sent
running for
him,
fucking office.
yeah,
You
he's
don't
running for fucking
run
office.
office in America if you don't have some kind of cushion.
Yeah, he has money. He's not poor. There is, I would say, such thing as like the poverty draft here in the United States. I would disagree with creators like that and Banata on that point. I did watch his video on this, and it's important. It's an important watch. Anyone that's interested in learning more specific details on Graham Plattner, because I'm really very much pulling from what Bad and Banata was talking about. Definitely watch his video on it because I would say he has a very critical view that's important to listen to even if I don't agree with everything he said. I agree with about 90% of what he said. I would say there is such thing as like a poverty draft here in the United States. My parents are two of those people. However, Graham Plattner was not one of those people. Graham Plattner came from a well-to-do family who sent him around the world after he graduated high school because he didn't want to go to college yet. So he went on like a trip around Europe and stuff. And then he came back and he enlisted to be a Marine. He had every opportunity, more than most Americans ever will, to be able to go and go to college and have a normal life. You know,
Oh,
he did not do that,
was not a fucking grunt.
huh? What'd
Like,
you say?
I said that guy was not a grunt. He was not a fucking like if you have rich parents and you fucking and they send you around like fucking Europe for a year before you join the fucking Marines or the army or what the fuck ever, then they have connections. Like you're not fucking like that's a fucking army intelligence background basically or a red flag for one, right? Like not saying that for sure he's intelligence, like I don't know, right? But like that's
Come on.
something that
He,
that's something that people in intelligence do.
and that's the
People
big thing
being
here
groomed for intelligence do.
is he did multiple tours. He didn't just do one or two. It's not like he was like, I have to go back because I need the money. Because people, you do actually get paid more if you go overseas and you do like that's one thing is that like my when my mom was married to her second husband, um, he was also an Air Force guy and was in Turkey for 2 years. And this is because, if he took that assignment, we were going to have more money, and we were not well off at that time either. Like that was not like that's part of the reason why he went in the first place. This is not that. Grant Plattner went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, all of these things because he did want to do war crimes. Like that is something that he specifically has talked about in his Reddit posts and all of these dug up things that he's done on the internet and like the last in the, like the many decades. And I think the most damning piece of evidence isn't anything is the tattoo. I mean, you could say like, yeah, he joined Blackwater, all of this stuff. That's all of that is like very a lot of evidence as to like the fact that he wanted to do this shit. But I would say the fact that he got a Nazi Totenkopf tattoo on his chest and he had it there for 20 years. This is not that's if you were not convinced at this point that this is a person who we should not be supporting in any aspect to be part of a progressive caucus in Congress, that should be it. The Nazi tattoo should be your like, nope, no, that's unacceptable. Because
So this is my hot take and also kind of my final take on Graham Plattner. I don't think that he's all that fucking important, but this is my one sentence take on fucking Graham Plattner. He is likely, right? I'm using the word likely because I don't have proof, right?
Mhm.
He is likely like a CIA or intelligence plant to gauge what you will and won't defend in the name of free healthcare, or Gaza, or what the fuck ever, right? Who you will like support, how terrible they can be before you say no, that's not my guy, right? They're using him as a litmus test to just see what
just a
will
gauge.
let slide. Yeah, just a gauge to see what will let slide on the American quote unquote left.
And I think that's a very important point because as I've talked about other like online creators who are really big in the leftist influencer sphere and everything have taken the bait essentially. Hassan Piker famously went on a whole big rant, and I was there for it. I watched this happen in real time on stream, where he basically yelled at a bunch, like basically was yelling at his more radical base, the more radical part of his viewership, that you are nothing, and you need to have the military on your side if you're going to do blah blah blah. Okay, but we don't need fucking Graham Plattner. Like, I'm sorry, but like it was a completely unjustified rant, and it is, I think, what really pushed me over the edge into being like, no, that he's an op at this point. Hassan Piker is an op to the
Every streamer is an op, dude. Streamers are a weapon against the working class. And
yeah,
even
no.
if they don't know that they're an asset, they're fucking like generally almost every streamer. If a streamer has an audience, right? Like I'm not saying that like every fucking kid, every like 22-year-old streaming Fortnite in their fucking basement is a fucking CIA asset, right? But if you have a large enough audience, you're probably on CIA payroll or some intelligence like networks like black budget fucking payroll, and you probably don't know it because
And
these
that's
people, one, don't look a fucking gift horse in the mouth, right? They see the paycheck and they say nice, and they don't fucking ask where it came from, especially now with like decentralized sort of like Patreon and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
That stuff can be like almost totally anonymous, and like rewarding them for certain things and then like not paying out if they do other things, right?
and that's the thing with, like, I would say like Socialism for All is like a content creator that like I listen to like his readings of like audiobooks of different, like What Is to Be Done and everything. Like he does all kinds of audiobooks, and he does some streaming as well, but he's way smaller. here's the thing. This person is like a person, and nowadays this is pretty small with 40,000 subscribers. That's pretty small in comparison to like the Majority Report and Hassan Piker, who are absolutely, in some ways, connected to, as you were talking about, I would say darker money. And they don't even probably know it. I think that's the important part here is that if you have any kind of traction, the ways in which Hassan Piker and all of these other huge streamers do, and it's specifically in politics, you are absolutely on the payroll and on the minds of these intelligence communities. You are absolutely there.
It was Parenti. I'm gonna drop a couple quotes. Parenti said, he said, oh, like lots of these anti-conspiracy leftists will say things like, "Oh, the CIA, the government, they don't care what you think." Right?
Yeah, that's what Hassan Piker has been saying.
Yeah, no, the only thing they care about is what you think. They don't care if you eat. They don't care if you have a job. They don't care if you go to school. They don't care if you, who you're friends with, whatever. They only care what you think. And the only thing that they want, that they're like really concerned with on like the macro level, is how do we control what they think.
Yeah, and this is, I think, the final cherry on the top of what I will say about Hassan Piker and my positions on him as one of the biggest leftist content creators out there, is that he has made that argument before about, oh well, y'all ain't shit, and I don't think Graham Plattner is an intelligence asset. And I just realized, no, he does actually know about things like COINTELPRO. He does know about things like the Jakarta method, like all of these different ways in which leftist groups can be infiltrated, leftist politics can be co-opted, the way intelligence really only cares about you being a communist or being about the dismantlement of capital because they work for the capitalists. And when he said that, I realized, oh no, 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 no. We need a mass exodus from this community. This is absolutely this is untenable. We cannot be here because this is an op at this point. This is an op to the movement. He served a purpose at one time. He does not serve a purpose anymore, other than to serve the purposes of capital and intelligence. And I know that's hard for people to hear. I completely understand that. It's one of those things that I have been watching this person for long enough to realize that if a leftist creator is starting to say things like, oh, the government doesn't care what you think, or the government doesn't care, like you're nothing to them, they are absolutely on that payroll, because the government absolutely cares what you think. The government does not want you to have leftist politics. The government does not want you to be educated in things like communist ideas. They have gone through considerable amounts of effort to make it so that we don't know about these things.
No, better yet, what they want is they want you to call yourself a communist, but also be a fucking idiot.
Yeah. And that's
you make the whole movement look dumb.
And that's exactly what Hassan Piker is. He probably doesn't even realize that he's on the payroll of these of intelligence assets and intelligence communities. He probably doesn't even realize that he's an asset to them. But he just is, by virtue of him advocating for bullshit like this. And so to end this episode, I want to read a couple of quotes from Lenin on opportunism. I'm going to go ahead and read the first one real fast, and it's from his work, One Step Forward, Two Steps Back, 1904. The opportunist, by his very nature, tends to avoid a definite and final solution of question. He is always seeking for alternatives. He rides like an eel between mutually exclusive points of view. He tries to, quote, be in agreement with all sides, but expresses his disagreements and amendments, doubts, pious and innocent wishes, etc., etc. And I think that's really important because one thing that I've noticed with, for example, Mamdani is that he's really, really good about at talking around his answer. He's really very good at not giving a non-answer in many cases. And we could also chalk that up to him just trying to bring it back to affordability and keep people on the subject. But I would also say this is a way for him to kind of deflect from more uncomfortable questions that people will have of him on his positions of things like socialism and Palestine.
Yeah. What was that quote from again?
That was Lenin from One Step Forward, Two Steps Back. And so the final quote that I'm going to say, this is a longer one, but I think it's important to read. This is from Socialism and War, 1915. In the past, before the war, opportunism was often looked upon as a legitimate, though, quote, deviationist and, quote, extremist component of the Social Democratic Party. For context, the Social Democratic Party at the time was like the Communist Party. Like I would say, like it doesn't mean the same thing as it does now, as it did then. Jumping back in, the war has shown the impossibility of this in the future. Opportunism has, quote, matured and is now playing to the full its role as emissary of the bourgeois and the working class movement. Unity with the opportunists has become sheer hypocrisy, exemplified by the German Social Democratic Party. On every important occasion, example, the August 4th vote, the opportunists present an ultimatum to which they give effect through their numerous links with the bourgeoisie, their majority on the executives of the trade unions, etc. Today, union with the opportunists actually means subordinating the working class to their, quote, own national bourgeoisie, and an alliance with the latter for the purpose of oppressing other nations and of fighting for dominant nation privileges. It means splitting the revolutionary proletariat of all countries.
Nice. Yeah, those are two great quotes. I wanted to also throw in one quote that is not from a a great communist leader like Lenin.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually from a now defunct Twitter poster called Crypto Cuttlefish, but he's saying this about Chapo Trap House. He says this in 2017. He said, "I've said before that I think the whole I'm CIA, LOL rejoinder is the nervous laugh of somebody who doesn't know who they really work for."
Yeah, no, and that I think is a really good point to leave off here is that stay skeptical and remain understanding in the fact that we can understand that the roles that these leftist influencers play, while also recognizing that they are not the fucking vanguard, that they are not the that they are not the end all be all of the movement. And if anything, it would probably do us more good to leave these people in the past and move on towards more radical futures. The Majority Report, Hassan Piker, all of the smaller streamers, I think of like Cinemarxism and like Maple Takes, like they're much smaller, but all of these, these people, they have a role to play, but that they are not the end all be all of this movement. And specifically with people who are as big as Hassan Piker, you have to recognize he's still on a platform owned by Jeff Bezos. There's a reason why he has 40,000 people watching him at any given moment. This is a person who, if he wasn't already an asset to them, he wouldn't be there. Realize that. If they wanted to get rid of him, they would already have done it. Not doing it now just makes me much more skeptical of the, quote, role that he plays. And when it comes to people like Graham Plattner and Zoran Mamdani, I would say much more so with Zoran Mamdani, take what you can get from people like him, because he does, again, offer certain things that we should be supporting, policies that are going to help people. But Zoran Mamdani is, once again, not the end all be all of this movement, and he never will be. And we have to continue to organize no matter what. This means being uncomfortable, getting out there and actually talking to people and being part of the movement and educating yourself. More than anything, educate yourself, read. So yeah, any closing comments, Comrade?
Stay vigilant, stay revolutionary, keep your eyes wide open.
Period. That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for coming on the show today to talk. I'm going to go ahead and hit